Last time we talked about a question a lot of you have been asking without even realizing it. When did feeling this way become normal? We talked about adaptation versus dysfunction, how your body can adjust to stress in ways that eventually feel normal even though they're not actually healthy. Today, I want to show you why that adaptation shows up in so many places at once. Maybe you sleep 8 hours and still wake up feeling exhausted. Maybe you lose your train of thought in the middle of the sentence, hit a wall every afternoon, or feel tired all day but wide awake at night. If any of that sounds familiar, you're not alone. Fatigue, brain fog, poor sleep, anxiety, digestive issues, and chronic pain. Whew, it's a lot. How many of these have you experienced? Maybe it's one, maybe it's almost all of them. Here's what fascinates me. People rarely come into my office with just one symptom. They're tired, but they're also anxious. They can't sleep, and their digestion has changed. They've developed headaches, and they can't focus the way they used to. Somewhere along the way, we've been taught to think that each of those is a separate problem. I don't think that's always true. I think, and we're finding through research and patient experiences, that they are often connected. And one of the first places I look for those connections is in the nervous system. Think about how many doctors it would take to treat that whole list. A neurologist, a gastroenterologist, a sleep specialist, maybe a pain specialist, maybe even your primary care physician. Specialists exist because they're experts in one area of the body, and that's a wonderful thing, but it can quietly train all of us, patients and doctors alike, to think of the body as separate parts instead of one connected, beautiful system. We start believing that because symptoms are treated separately. They must have started separately. But what if, instead, they're connected? Let me show you why I don't think about the body this way. Imagine this tree is your health, with a trunk, branches, and leaves. Fatigue, brain fog, poor sleep, pain, digestive issues, and anxiety. These are the symptoms we notice. They're what bring people into the office, and they are real. But if you enjoy nature the way I do, and when you walk outside you see a tree with yellow leaves, would you assume the problem started in just the leaves? Of course not. You'd wonder what was happening deeper. Is there enough water? Are the roots healthy? Is the soil providing what the trees need? We instinctively understand that leaves reflect what's happening underneath. I believe our bodies work the same way. Well, let's talk about the ever-important roots. These roots represent a system that supports everything else. The nervous system, the circulatory system, the respiratory system, the digestive system, the urinary system, the musculoskeletal system, and the endocrine system. These systems don't work independently. They're constantly communicating with one another. Here's a simple example. When your nervous system senses ongoing stress, a demanding job, an old injury, a health scare, grief, even stress you've stopped noticing because it's been there so long, it shifts into a protective state. Some people call it fight or flight. I often call it survival mode because that's what it is. That state was never meant to be permanent. It's meant to help you get through a threat and then stand down, rest, recover, and bring back into balance. But when it stays switched on, it starts reallocating resources. Digestion slows down because your body doesn't prioritize digestion when it thinks it's in danger. Sleep gets lighter and more fragmented because deep rest requires your system to believe it's safe. Your brain starts filtering information differently because it's scanning for threats instead of focusing calmly. That's your brain fog. And your energy gets rationed because survival mode is expensive to run. That's your fatigue. One root under strain, and it shows up in 4 different branches that look completely unrelated on the surface. But roots don't exist by themselves. They grow in the soil. Infection, genetic, nutrition, injury, toxins, energy, and stress. Some of you are born with a genetic tendency that makes certain systems more sensitive. Some of you had an injury or illness that never fully resolved. Some are carrying stress, physical or emotional, that's been running in the background for years. Not everyone's soil looks the same, and not every root is affected the same way. But these are the kinds of influences constantly shaping how your systems function and how far into survival mode they end up living. This is key. Not every person has the same combination. But these are the questions worth asking. Not simply, what symptoms do I have? But, What's influencing the system that supports my health? And has my body been stuck in survival mode longer than it should be? Because when we ask better questions, we uncover better answers. One of my favorite moments as a physician isn't when I finally find an answer. It's when a patient looks at me and says, "That actually makes sense." Not because all their symptoms have disappeared, but because for the first time, they can see how the pieces fit together. There's something hopeful about that. Confusion creates fear. Understanding creates possibility. When we stop looking at symptoms as isolated events and start seeing them as connected signs of a system under strain, we begin asking different, powerful, amazing questions. That's why I believe understanding should always come before treatment. Once you understand why your body is responding the way it is, you're in a much better position to decide what to do next. Now, maybe this resonates with you or someone you know. If you want to explore this idea further, read this month's Discovery Journal article or visit the link below. Or, if your symptoms no longer make sense when viewed separately, it may be time to start with Discovery. Because when you know better, you do better so you can be better.